Good evening and welcome. On behalf of the Mayor, City Council, we have with us Mayor Moe, Council members DeWalt, Nicholas, and Smalls. The men and women of Laurel Police Department, I'd like to welcome you to our opioid awareness presentation. With us tonight, we have several volunteers that are going to speak in regards to them being subject matter experts in various fields of opioid epidemic and what we are doing to battle it. We have with us, in no particular order, Jim Goings, who's the director of Hope House on Main Street. We have Emily Upton, an RN or charge nurse, also of Hope House. We have our chief health official of the city of Laurel, Dr. Unegbu. We have Allison Henry, who is a patient educator at Hope House. We have Special Agent in Charge, Carl Calder, of the Drug Enforcement Administration out of Washington, D.C., field office. The purpose of this meeting, or this presentation, is to bring some awareness to what we are currently battling in regards to the opioid epidemic / heroin / fentanyl / carfentanil addictions that are occurring throughout the state or throughout the country. In the state of Maryland, from January to September of 2017, there were 1,501 opioid overdose deaths. Of that 1,501, 1,173 were fentanyl related. I personally suffered a loss in February of 17 from a fentanyl overdose. So it is very near and dear to my heart. So what I would like to do is I would like to turn the microphones over to Dr. Unegbu to do a presentation on the clinical awareness and what the doctor's offices and clinical aspect of what they're doing to recognize the dependencies.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Uzo Nebu, and thank you. It's an honor to be here. Mayor, council members, Chief of Police, McLaughlin. My presentation pretty much is geared towards the same presentation that others will be having, but I'm going to be looking more on the clinical aspect of it. Managing opioid abuse, dependence, and addiction. Opioids have morphine-like actions, and they're pretty much a natural product found in resins of opium poppy. Usually the examples would be like morphine, codeine, and therbane. Some of these common opioid derivatives that you might have seen out there in the stores, in the pharmacies, will be like the hydromorphone, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and diacetyl morphine, which is the heroin. Addiction is one of the issues or concerns that we do have in our society today. And the definition is when you have continued substance use in the face of adverse consequences. The overriding feature here is more of compulsion. A good example would be the drug alcohol. If you use that excessively, that it leads to intoxication. Eventually, it could impair your function, and then eventually, if for some reason, if you decide to drive and you may be stopped by police and found drunken, and your license may be confiscated. Now, say for instance, 2 days later, you go back doing the same thing because you have ingested the toxin or the drug without knowing the consequences behind it, or without being conscious of the consequences behind it. It appears that you're being impaired and you're not able to understand the consequences that would lead for you to have these problems. So the key presence of the substance, function deteriorates, but the use continues. Dependence, the definition is in a state which the body relies on a substance for normal function. A good example is for someone who has a lower back pain, and just due to the fact that they're not capable of functioning with that pain, once they take a medication or pain medicine, they're able to do their function. So the body is actually recognizing that whenever that is off of the system, it's no longer able to function. But once they ingest that medication or that drug, they're able to do their normal function. The key part for dependence is the presence of a substance, then function normalizes. It's different from tolerance, whereby you have progressively decreasing response to a drug with exposure. So the more you ingest, your response decreases. So increased doses are necessary to get the same effect. This usually refers to repeated or prolonged exposure, which is called chronic tolerance. Rarely, drugs may increase with repeated exposure, which usually we call that the reverse tolerance. Having high tolerance, example, needing high dose of a drug is not an addiction. With all these, we have to talk about withdrawals. And withdrawal is a group of negative physical and mental effects that actually discontinuation of the substance will lead to some adverse reactions or some problems to the individual. And some of these are the signs and symptoms that you may see when someone is actually undergoing withdrawal. It varies depending on the amount that you ingested and how long you have actually been on the medication. And some of these signs and symptoms may vary. So potential red flags that we do have in misuse of prescription opioids, one is medical history suggestive of doctor shopping. In my practice, I've seen a couple of people that will come, and when they're giving you their history, they pretty much, you may deduce from their history that they have actually seen almost 5 or 10 doctors prior to seeing you. So that kind of gives you an idea that they might have been doctor shopping. Sometimes they will give you this impression that they run out of their medications repeatedly. So something like, for most of us, we try to write the prescription for maybe 7 to 10 days or like 14 days, but they come back 3 days later and say, oh, it's finished. Other situations where we may run into is in the office is maybe the prescription was stolen. I usually lock it up somewhere, my medication, and it was stolen. Possession of numerous opioid medication bottles. I usually like to have all my patients to bring all their medications in the office, and if you go through it, you might find maybe 10 or 20 bottles of it are more of opioid medications. The other red flags that usually family members may see or even the provider may see will be unexplained changes in personality. Loved ones may come to the office and tell us that my husband, usually he's always sitting quietly and we all have fun and have dinner, but now he disappears sometimes in the evening time. We don't know where he is, and sometimes we find him passed out when he comes in the morning. Marked mood swings you may see, unusual pronounced drug side effects, such as drowsiness, marked constipation, and confusion, especially the constipation, which is the biggest that we've been seeing in the emergency room. That's one of the things that we do see out there too, and family members do notice that. Treatment. Senator John McCain actually stated it well that one of the main causes of alarming increase in drug overdose in the United States is the overprescription of highly addictive opioids, which have increased by 300% over the last 15 years. This is actually true because, you know, at first, before we always look at the problem is with the patient, but I think we have to also look on the other end of it, that if you control the supply of it, that can possibly help in the society, that you have less of it out there, and then people may not be addicted to it or misuse it. The opioid treatment options that we have is stemming from that statement, whereby the primary care will now have to, all of us, we follow the CDC guidelines that we do have there and FDA guidelines. And there are some recommendations that they do have, making sure you have a contract, making sure you don't dispense or you don't write prescriptions more than 7 days or 14 days. So limiting those prescriptions will help in reducing the amount of it out there. But nevertheless, we don't want to undermine the treatment of the patient. So we'll still have to do some research, investigate further as to the reason why the patient is having this problem. When all fails or we're not able to find the problem, then that's when you may seek for help, either a psychiatrist or a pain specialist, to follow the patient and be able to provide the appropriate medication for the patient. Search for etiology of pain and how to treat the root cause. On the other end, we have our colleagues, the pharmacists or independent pharmacies. Their own end, if they play their role right, which is not refill and pain medication prescriptions with repeated prescriptions. We always recommend that when a doctor is managing a patient, try to make sure that the patient goes to the same pharmacy so that if there's any discrepancy or disparities, you could be able to find that out right away. I think that's pretty much it on my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. I'd like to now turn it over to Allison Henry Manos so that she can describe some of her subject matter expert material. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. My name's Allison Manos. I'm a registered nurse at Hope House. I do the patient education. Also, I'm a recovering addict. Where do I start? My addiction really didn't kick off until I was in my early 30s, but it was always there, festering as I was growing up. I had issues growing up with bulimia, sense of self. I hated myself. I would put anything in me just to take, just to make myself feel better and, just to cover who I really was. And I didn't like who I was. So just, I know I'm a little nervous up here. Sorry. Where was I going with this? I managed very well. I also suffer from GAD, which is generalized anxiety disorder, which immediately treated with benzos. So I managed that for many, many years, never abused it. Finished nursing school, had a wonderful husband, 2 beautiful children, had everything I could ever ask for. It all happened, 17 years ago. Me and my ex-husband, we decided to move to the Eastern Shore, built our home, dream home, beautiful home. I mean, I had everything. I was working at Doctor's Hospital, commuting. I wasn't happy. Addicts don't adjust to change very well. It was a big adjustment for me. Moving from, I grew up here in Laurel, and to move to the middle of nowhere, I just wasn't happy. Had my last son, he's going to be 17 tomorrow. And when I was pregnant with him, I was waiting, I had herniated a disc in my neck, and I was waiting to have my first surgery. And at Doctor's Hospital, I was working on the orthopedic floor. So, of course, the surgeons that I worked with were doing the surgery. And I had the surgery. It was very successful. And as soon as I started taking those opiates, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. It made me just want to go, go, go. I loved it, but it just kept going on and on. Next thing you know, another back surgery came along. And this was like 2 years later. And these doctors were still prescribing these opiates to me. But you know what? I never blamed them. I asked for them. It was my choice. Had my second surgery, kept on going. Next thing you know, I'm buying them online. I'm doctor shopping. Now Next thing you know, I get arrested for prescription forgery. Stealing in the hospitals, whatever I could get. Fast forward a few years later, they finally caught up with me, revoked my nursing license. I lost everything. Everything. My addiction got so bad that I ended up on heroin, and actually walked out on my family. But, you know, I did it for them. If you ask any addict, what keeps you out there? Why can't you stop? And it's the fear of that withdrawal. I mean, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. I ended up in Cambridge, Maryland. Of course, with, you know, I always had a boyfriend. Of course, it was always one that was using. The first one that I was with him for 5 years. And he was really bad off. He was worse than I was, if you can imagine that. He ended up committing suicide. And moved right on to the next one, and same thing happened. He ended up going to jail. Well, he didn't commit suicide, the second one. He ended up in jail, and I was still out there on my own. I'm going to make this short. My bottom was attempted suicide, strung out, homeless in a hotel room. And at the moment, I always say that it was the hand of God, because at that moment, my son, who was going to be 26, he was 19 at the time, he called me, like, instantly right after that moment. And just, I could hear it in his voice. I mean, I hadn't had contact with my children in almost a year. You know, this went on and off for years. My family didn't know. I never involved my family. I was one of those that I just stayed away from my family. I was embarrassed. You know, I still had a little bit of pride left in me. It wasn't much, but I knew what I was doing was wrong. My son had called me, and he knew he could sense what was going on. And within 20 minutes, my sister was there. And I was admitted at Dorchester County Hospital, psych ward, 11 days, and then straight to Whitsett Center in Chestertown. And that was my clean date is May 15th, 2012. I'm coming up on 6 years. I was probably in treatment a little over 30 days. They kept me about a week longer than usual, because I was not only coming off the heroin, I was also buying methadone off the street. And so my detox was really, it was rough. But I remember the first week I was in treatment, my sister was coming up to see me the first week. And I had it in my head that I was going to have her take me home. I couldn't do it. And I'm sitting there waiting for her, and she was late. And, you know, of course, I'm getting angry. You know, I just wanted to get out of there. And I was told they were in the lobby. And I walk around the corner, and my son was with her, my 19-year-old. And it was at that moment when I saw, God, the hurt on that boy's face. And it was at that moment where I said, no, this is it. I can't do this to them. And I stayed in treatment. I completed it. Probably about a month out of treatment, I started the process of, I signed up for IOP on my own. I still had my job. I was working at Denny's as a waitress. I never lost that job. And I started the process of getting my nursing license back. And I was fully reinstated. May 16th of 2017. 5 years it took for me to get my nursing license back. I'm currently on probation, but I'm blessed. Um, um, the hardest thing was when they put me on probation, being a clinical nurse for so many years, I couldn't get a job in a hospital because I have limitations. For 3 years I can't administer narcotics or psych meds. So a lot of doors were slammed in my face up until October of 2017. I sent my resume into Hope House, and the director of nursing called me, and she created a position for me and made me I am the patient education addictions nurse. And I love my job. I wouldn't trade it for the world. I mean, I work with addicts every day, and I do the admissions in Crownsville sometimes, and I love them because it's kind of like that's when I get to start the intervention with them. And I'm very open to all my patients about my recovery and my addiction. I don't hide nothing. I've known Rich for years, and you can't hide it. You got to put this out there. I mean, because it's killing a lot of people that just, and it's not only the young lives that it's taken, but oh my God, what it's doing to their families. I can't, my mother always said to me, I remember when I got clean, my mom asked me, she said, Allison, what did I do wrong? I said, it wasn't you. You had nothing to do with this, And my mother has always, to this day, been my biggest supporter. And so anyway, I'm going to stop right there. So sorry to cry so much. Thank you.
Allison, thank you. Congratulations, and you truly are a survivor, and I wish you nothing but the best. Before we go into the next phase, I would like to state a couple things. If we continue on the trend that is currently we're experiencing in this country, every one of you, everybody watching this is going to be touched somehow. Whether it's your immediate family, whether it's extended family, whether it's friends, you're going to find that this epidemic, this disease, this illness is going to impact your lives. A lot of things have changed as far as policing, and I'm going to let the DA discuss some of it, but a lot of the changes in policing are the Good Samaritan Act, which used to cover us for medical aid and that type of thing, has been extended and improved. It now, if you're at a party, if you're in an incident where there's an overdose, you are absolutely scot-free of possession of any drugs, possession of any paraphernalia, and to include providing alcohol to a minor. That's how serious we are in providing some type of intervention and or trying to save lives. Governor Hogan recently signed some stuff in the legislation. He's provided a lot of money. As a result of that, every one of our officers, every single officer in the city of Laurel has been trained and has been provided 2 Narcan kits. So far, we've had 3 saves. That doesn't sound significant, but it is significant. That's 3 people that they're going to get a chance to carry on. They're getting a second chance, and their families aren't getting a phone call or a notification that they're dead. So it's very beneficial. It doesn't cost the taxpayers a dime because it's coming from the state and it's coming through the health department, and it's being replenished through the health department. So it definitely has been a huge benefit. The other thing I wanted to say is we do welcome questions and answers during this panel. If you're not comfortable in speaking in front of a group of people, there's a basket on the side on the table over there with cards. Please feel free to write your questions and we'll try to address them. Thank you. At this point, I'd like to turn it over to Emily.
Hi, I'm Emily. I'm the charge nurse at Hope House. And a lot of times when I tell people that I work with addicts, I'm met with, well, wow, it must be hard. The day-to-day functioning is not the hard part for us. The hard part is the calls, the losses, weekly, daily. someone we've treated has died. Someone who left, within a couple days has died. One particularly profound case that bothered me a lot was this one boy. He had tried to leave AMA, and his father went and brought him back, begged us to take him back. And he ended up almost completing, and he left AMA, and he died after shooting a half cap of heroin, which is a very small amount. When you leave treatment, after abstaining for quite some time, your tolerance is reduced, and they're at a higher risk of overdose at that point. But that's the hardest part. They're people. I'm a Laurel girl myself. I grew up in Maryland City, and there's, countless peers and associates that I know who are using and who have overdosed and died. And that's very painful to know that your community is hurting in such a way. And, sometimes you just feel powerless. And a lot of times when I tell people that I work at Hope House, it's often met with, well, I have a cousin or I have a brother and I don't know what to do. So it's really important that as a community, we know what there is to be done about this. I work both at Hope House and I also work at 2 methadone clinics in Baltimore City. And, inpatient treatment is one option. But there's also several others. There's, you can choose to get on a methadone maintenance program or buprenorphine, Subutex, Suboxone maintenance. Now, a lot of times that stuff is demonized, because, they might appear intoxicated, but it's, individually controlled, administered by a doctor, and it's treatment. At my methadone clinic, there are some people who, if I didn't see them every day, nobody would know if they had lived or died. And that's such an amazing thing to be able to give somebody, just to have that contact to make sure that somebody knows if they're living or not, if they're struggling with something. So if you were to know somebody who was addicted to a substance, particularly an opioid, I would say the number one most important thing you can do is to be trained on Narcan. Countless times patients have come into us after having family found them unresponsive and they were able to call 911 in time, but there's also countless cases where maybe someone's mother found them and they didn't know what to do and 911 didn't get there on time. Arm yourself with that knowledge. Narcan, you can get it through the state of Maryland at any pharmacy without a prescription. And it's a very simple procedure. You don't have to be a medical professional to administer Narcan to people. It can be intranasally, it can be an injection. There's even like cool injectors that tell you exactly what to do, the FZO product. But that can save a life. That time and effort that you take to learn this skill can save a life. We've had staff members administer it in parking lots, on walks. It's anywhere, it's everywhere, it's all around us, the potential for overdose. Someone found someone unresponsive in a car at the 7-Eleven when they were grabbing their coffee in the morning. You never know when this is going to impact you. It may not be your significant other or your child or your brother, but there might be an opportunity that you have to save a life. So equip yourself with the knowledge to save somebody. The other advice I would give, if you know somebody who's suffering, be aware of the options. Inpatient option is one. Outpatient option is also another. If you can get them to attend. Consider Suboxone or methadone maintenance. If it's something, Suboxone and methadone are partial agonists, which basically means they set inside the opioid receptor and they stimulate it so that they're getting relief from their cravings, which should inhibit them from the desire to use. Their other option is there's a Vivitrol injection, which is a complete antagonist, which will set inside the opioid receptor and not allow it to be stimulated at all. So when they try to use an opioid, they won't feel anything. You can get all of those things on an outpatient basis. Sometimes people feel like just because they can't come inpatient, they can't get any type of treatment for their opioid abuse, but that's not the case. Whether, you suggest to somebody to go inpatient or outpatient or get some type of medication management, you can't not do anything. Sometimes maybe they're not ready yet, and that's okay. But just letting them know that you're there and that you're willing to support them on their journey to seeking some type of treatment is really, really important. A lot of people don't know how to do that. Maybe just referring somebody to their doctor. Little steps.
Step up to the microphone. You okay with that? Okay. Thank you. It's just because it's being recorded.
Where would you refer people in Laurel for methadone maintenance?
Now, I do know that there is Cherry Hill Methadone Clinic. That's like right behind where Barefoot Shoes used to be.
Right.
That's there had been another clinic in Laurel that had closed,
Right.
which was very sad. But I think most of their patients moved there. So that would be the best case. And they may also offer like the buprenorphine, Suboxone maintenance there as well.
Okay. So at this point, the one in Cherry
Yeah.
Hill is the only one available.
That's the one that I'm familiar with. There might be more, but probably not many.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I would now like to turn the microphone over to Special Agent in Charge Carl Calder of the Drug Enforcement Administration. Carl.
Good evening. All right. I tell you, I spend most of my time in programs just like this. Probably all of my time, and it allows my agents to do their jobs. And I would have to say, I want to first tell you about my division, the Washington Division. It covers our area of responsibility is Maryland, Virginia, and the District of Columbia. And before January 1, I also covered West Virginia. So I see this from what we call the epicenter of this problem, with West Virginia leading the country in overdose deaths per capita. And you have Maryland with a little different twist, because sometimes there's a little violence attributed to it. And in Virginia, of course, we found out that the overdoses have exceeded automobile accidents. And that's probably more than what we're seeing everywhere now. But our job is to enforce the drug laws of the United States. And because of this heroin problem, we've had to change our way of investigating, because we now have to find out who's poisoning communities like your community. And as any chief of police will tell you, we can't arrest our way out of this. So our time is spent, we spend a lot of time talking to communities about resource models. And an example of that, what we've done in Maryland is created a resource model which has been launched throughout my division. And that resource model is to train first responders on how to handle overdose scenes and deaths. Working with EMS personnel, working with our state and local counterparts, health department, just anyone who's involved in the response process. And through that, that's how we collect data so that we can enforce those who are bringing the heroin, and now we're dealing with fentanyl into your communities. And in other states that I deal with, the other states, sometimes it's a little difficult getting counties and municipalities to agree to this resource model. But in the state of Maryland, every county has been trained on that resource model. That for one, is a plus. There's two issues that we're dealing with: the street level heroin and, of course, the prescription drugs, because that's a problem that we also are confronted with, the overprescribing. And we're not saying that every doctor is a bad doctor, because 95 to 98% of them are good doctors. But what we find ourselves doing is training our doctors, our pharmacists, and practitioners on overprescribing. And that's the second part of what we do in DEA, is the regulatory aspects of the enforcement. And so between the street drugs and the pharmaceutical drugs, there's a huge problem. And then coupling that with the fentanyl, which is synthetic opioid, and there's two types of that: the illicit fentanyl, which is prescribed by a doctor, and there's the illicit form, which is imported into the United States from Mexico and China. So, but the chemicals being produced in China. So we've begun to regulate those chemicals. We also, when you deal with the chemicals, the drug traffickers and producers of these chemicals have a way to change the molecular structure so that it's hard for us to prosecute. Well, we've just been allowed to emergency schedule the fentanyl analogs, and so that's helping us in the prosecution. But now in educating communities, we now find that we have another problem in dealing with the dark web, because the chemicals are now sold and purchased through the internet. And that makes it even more difficult when you're talking about a substance that can kill you at 3.5 milligrams, and that's a residue, and that can kill you. And so now with the brilliant minds who decide that they want to develop pills with this fentanyl, the fentanyl analogs, it makes it even more difficult, because now we have people out there thinking they're dealing with Xanax, and it's actually fentanyl. So our investigations are really, it puts a strain on investigations, because we can't prolong investigations as long as we would like, because once we identify that fentanyl's in the community, we have to take immediate action. And so everything that I'm telling you here today, and I'll take any questions, it's all about prevention, treatment, education, recovery, and everything that's been said before I began speaking. And it also amounts to communities working together, building coalitions to deal with this problem, from our school systems to our churches, our faith-based groups. You know, I serve on several committees with faith-based organizations, and you would be surprised when I say this, but our faith-based groups are first responders. They're not the traditional responders, but they're first responders, because who's the family member going to go to when they have a family member hurting or broken? they're going to go to their priest. They're going to go to the ministers. And our churches have to take a stand. So I serve on several steering committees with churches in states, various states. So that's a plus. But these are all things that in my 32 years I've never seen this before, because whether we're behind the 8 ball on this or not, we have to, one, identify the problem, and we can't say that it won't happen to us, because it can happen to anybody. You know, it doesn't matter what demographic background, it doesn't matter what race, it doesn't matter how much money you bring home in your paycheck every 2 weeks or every week. It can happen to anybody. And that's the message that we have to bring. And we have to teach it in our schools. We have to teach it in our communities that we can't ignore this problem. Because if you don't deal with it up front, you'll have to deal with it in the end. And from all of this stems other crimes. And that's what the chief has to deal with. So as I'm going to stop right here, because you're going to have questions. But I tell you, I've never seen it like this before. And just imagine a police chief with 5 officers, and they have a city problem with 1,000 people addicted to heroin. That's a trying time. And that's what I've seen in counties that have never seen a DEA agent before, and yet alone a special agent in charge. That's what we're seeing. And so it's incumbent upon everybody to band together. We're working hard to track down sources to stop them from dealing in your communities. The laws from each state, your governor, he's enacted an assault on this problem. And I know it because I serve on his task forces, and like I do in Virginia and DC. So I'm going to stop right here. And if you have any questions, I'll be here until you tell me to leave.
Have you seen any significant spread of carfentanil into the DMV area, or is that less?
We've seen it, and it's here. Of course, we've made a number of seizures in the state between the carfentanil and the fentanyl analogs themselves, and it's here, and we just have to control it.
And then a follow-up to that is Narcan to an extent effective for carfentanil, or is there something further needed?
Well, the problem is that now you may, the stronger it is, you may need 2 injections, 3 injections. So at this point, Narcan is what we have, and the problem with this is now our officers have to carry Narcan for safety. So now we're not only trying to save lives, we're trying to save our officers and agents from the problem, and our canine units. And so that in itself is a major problem. And when you're talking about addiction, and it's a huge problem, because there are other problems associated with the addiction. and we're talking about mental health issues and a number of other things. And so the Narcan, you know, it's a great help, you know, but you know, the tracking of it, we just launch it, and if we can use some of the data that's, you know, collect data along with it to track down the locations of where this is occurring, and so that we can plant resources into those areas. That's the difficult part, and that's why this resource model is so important, because now we can map locations. We know where we need to place resources, because those areas, you know, and if we wait until it gets to the medical examiners, it's too late. Although that data from the medical examiners is important, but if it gets to the hospitals, we're not getting anything because of HIPAA laws. So we have to train our first responders how to collect that data. And there are different tools now that we're using. There's an OD mapping tool that HIDA has produced. And hey, our officers, when they respond, medical professionals, place that information right into that database. And so, you know, in trying to answer your question, I just thank God that we have Narcan, okay? And you know, there's all sorts of harm reduction methods out there, because you now have other diseases because of this epidemic, hepatitis, AIDS, and so, you know, just dealing with the whole spectrum of it, and the Narcan is just one piece of it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I saw on Fox 5, I think it was last night or either this morning, where now the opioids is being distributed by the veterinarian doctors for their pets. Did anybody see that on Fox 5? Yes. So, I mean, is that being addressed? I mean, I've just seen it on the news. Is that something that you all are working on?
Yeah, we have to deal with that aspect of it. We're talking about any practitioner, from doctors and veterinarians, because with that, even the pain medication for animals is being diverted into you know, to the community.
Right.
And so that's one of the areas that we regulate also. And so, you know, having prescription drug awareness conferences, which we had a couple of those the last 2 years. We had over 1,000 pharmacists attend that, and doctors who were willing to attend, because they have to be responsible. And that's what we regulate. And a lot of it is you have greed. And if you have a practitioner or someone who's responsible for the drug, misusing it and selling it behind the, you know, under the table, that's a problem, and that's what we deal with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for you, the nurse at Hope House. You had talked about you can get Narcan at the pharmacy, like if you wanted to carry it just for safety precautions, so anybody can get it?
Yeah. Before this, you used to have to get like training involved, and then you'd have to carry a card, but that's no longer in effect. You can just go to any pharmacy and just go fill it. Now you have to pay like your associated copays with it. Like mine was like $25 to carry it with me, and you have.
Is that just for a single dosage, or do you get a pack?
You get a 2-pack in there, because oftentimes if you administer Narcan and you don't see a response within a certain set of minutes, maybe 3 to 5, then you want to re-inject into the other nostril or inhalation.
Well, I just want to thank you all for having this panel, because this has really been eye-opening. Most of you know I work at the hospital, and I see a lot of different things up there, but this has just really expanded my knowledge on this whole opioid epidemic. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening, and thank you for all that you do. I have two questions. It doesn't help the illicit drugs, but for the prescribed drugs, are the pharmacies connected in any way so that they can track if somebody's moving from pharmacy to pharmacy, or are they really independent?
No, they're part of the process. Each pharmacy or pharmacist has databases that they can also monitor. A pharmacist has the authority to decline a prescription, and that's something that they're trained on, and we're doing more of that training because of the prescription monitoring programs. Every state has a monitoring program except probably one, and so that's their job, is to monitor the prescriptions, the dosages, and that sort of thing, and those prescriptions that come across the desk.
You would think that if we can help there, that
Yeah.
sort of slows it down, at least for the prescribed drugs.
Well, I think that's being done. I think there was a fear from the pharmacists that they were like the blame for this whole problem, but they're not. They have a responsibility, and their responsibility is to recognize overprescribing, and that's what they're trained on. And sometimes and what we've done is provided them with training. Even meeting with the pharmacy boards, establishing that relationship in the state of Maryland. And as a matter of fact, today we had a training for the U.S. Attorney's Office and all those people who are investigating those prescription drug crimes. And tomorrow we're having another one in Baltimore. Where we're meeting with the Department of Health and the FBI representatives who investigate these the fraudulent prescriptions and that sort of thing.
Okay, and my second is, if we had a large group like a church that wanted to train its congregation on Narcan, are there funds available from the programs that would fund the Narcan for large groups?
Well, I believe I was in I think at Hartford County, and they put on their own Narcan training and provided the community with free Narcan. Or one of the counties that I was, and then there's the Atwood Foundation and different foundations that come to your communities, and they put on free training, and they actually administer the
All right,
Narcan.
that would be worth looking into,
Yeah.
because it's a great thing, but not everybody can do the $25, copay
Right.
to get it. So
Right.
if we can equip
Yeah.
the community, that'll be great. Thank you.
Okay. PG.
I don't know if they're still offering them, but they were out by the hospital.
Yeah. Yeah,
It was the county.
Right.
And in fact, Maryland Behavioral Health
Mhm.
has a web-based video that you can watch to get the certification. You can take the test at the end of that. And you can, again, as part of the Narcan distribution, you can walk into a pharmacist with that. And a lot of times they'll honor it and they'll give it to you free, and then they'll backbill the state. Not all the time, but there's been a lot of interaction with the pharmacies and the pharmacists, and as was discussed, there's a lot of different delivery methods. There's one that's newly come out that is very similar to an EpiPen. So it's very clean, and it tells you what to do, and it's what we're carrying is nasal. So it is available, and some of the pharmacies are recognizing the the certification through the behavioral health of the state of Maryland.
Right. I know Carroll County may have it too, have done it. So it's yeah, I thought so. You better.
I won't forget you. I got you.
Some of the places have a similar thing where they'll do the training and then you'll take a written test. You get your certification card and they fill your prescription on site. I know Baltimore County does do that, maybe 2 or 3 a season.
Because those are the resources that they can collect and refer people to, recovery, and even sponsoring NA in their churches. You know, these are the things that we can do as communities. Yeah, and our schools training. There's free training for teachers and students. You know, from elementary school to high school. So, you know, it's there.
Also, if I may add to your first question, for physicians, you know, we do have a system now that they've started in Maryland, which is the CRISP, that allows us to be able to access and look up, you know, if patients have actually been to previous doctors and if they've gotten any previous prescriptions. So that is another way that we actually can control that.
Thank you, Agent Calder. And unfortunately, Ginger Rosella, who was a parent who suffered a personal loss, was unavailable. She actually got the flu this morning, so she was unable to attend. We were fortunate enough to be able to backfill that position, or that vacancy, with Jim Goins, who is the director of Hope House. So, Jim?
Thank you, Chief, to the mayor in his absence, to the council, to all this fine panel. I tell you, I'm just learning so much here today. I have been with Hope House for 24 years, and Hope House is a residential short-term treatment program, anywhere from 28 to 30 days. Now, what happens is we approach it from a two-pronged approach, from the medical component and the behavioral. We have a detoxification. Emily is our charge nurse and does the overseeing of the nursing unit. I've heard a lot about the symptom, but I want to talk a little bit about the problem. We believe that alcohol and drugs are not the problem. The problem, it's a symptom of a culmination of emotional behavioral problems. We have 89 beds in Maryland, 32 on Main Street and 40-something in Crownsville. We have approached it from a treatment of the body, the mind, and the soul, in the attempt of trying to reduce the stigma that's attached to chemical dependency disorder, we call it. Not addiction, it's a chemical dependency disorder where the brain has been hijacked. And the nurse talked about the receptor sites and the brain that becomes impacted with the opioids. We have a culture at Hope House that's different than any place I've ever worked. We have an unconditional kindness towards our patients. In other words, they're suffering with a disease of addiction. And to treat them in a disrespectful manner, we have dismissed doctors, counselors, and the like from Hope House because of their attitudes towards treating this disease. So I got some good news and some bad news. The bad news is that there's no cure. The good news is that it can be arrested. As Allison talked about, people that come to Hope House, they come from all walks of life. We've had doctors there in treatment. We've had police officers in treatment, lawyers, and people that have had pristine lives, but they fell victim to this disease. We have treated approximately 960 people this year in a 30-day program. The biggest issue for Hope House is helping people to develop skills to manage those emotional issues, because it is a painkiller, and the pain that they're trying to kill is not physical, but it becomes emotional and psychological. We have a regimented day, a seven-hour treatment course per day, starting at 8:30 and ending at around 4, where we do education on the disease of addiction, relapse prevention, problem solving, anger management, and on and on. It is, and again, I was pulled up in a snare, so I'm kind of all over the place. But I just want to talk a little bit about what it is that we're attempting to do in helping people to understand that this disease has to be treated for the rest of your life. But there are 3 premier opiate-based medications that are helping: Suboxone, methadone, and buprenorphine. And that arrests the disease long enough for a person to make significant behavior changes, lifestyle changes. Right now, the 30 people in Hope House, 20 of them are unemployed and homeless. So we have to try to enhance motivation to get back into the stream of life and begin to solve some of your problems through daily confrontation of these problems and not running around them. So again, it's the medical and the behavioral approach. The detox is roughly around 7 days, 3 to 7 days with the detox, and then the treatment regimen really starts in terms of the interaction. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Again, we don't want to, we want to get away from treating the symptom and start treating the problems. You know, understanding what it is that drugs do for you. You know, we all have basic needs, and to help our clients understand what is alcohol and drugs doing for you, and what can you do to get that need met without the alcohol and drugs. Statistically, they say it's roughly around 6-week period that people remain abstinent, and the relapse happens after that 6 week. Or we encourage 12-step meetings, AA, NA, they're everywhere, and you can go 24/7. And the biggest and the best help for any client is created by this guy, manual labor. Get a job. A job will help you to begin to rebuild your self-worth and self-esteem. And just lastly, it is determined that 65 to 70% of people that are using chemicals are suffering with underlying co-occurring disorders, depression, bipolar, anxiety, and so forth. And many of them are self-medicating. So every client that comes to Hope House gets a psychiatric evaluation, assessment, and a mental health treatment or therapy to begin to treat the problem and not the symptom. For example, you have a toothache, you put Anasol on it, it doesn't solve the problem. It just deals with the symptom. So we try to get into helping our clients to deal with the problems of what caused it. And there's no one particular, no one set thing, a culmination of life issues. And it's interesting that a greater percentage of our clients now are coming after abusing prescription medications. And they turn to heroin because it's cheaper and it's more available. And so they go to the heroin, and then you talk about the fentanyl. And what I understand now is that you can buy a cap of heroin for less than $6. So it makes it more available and people become more addicted. So thank you so much, and I enjoyed all the presentations.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'd like now to give you a snapshot of what we, as a local agency, are doing. Agent Calder talked about training. Training is absolutely, it's paramount for what we're doing today. Our response modes have changed. Our methodology has changed. You know, the police, we're here to arrest, we're here to prosecute. Truthfully, right now, particularly as far as this goes, we're dealing with education, intervention, and finally arrest if necessary. That is the last step because there's such an abundance of this out here. As far as the policing and what we're doing, we have absolutely changed our process for search and seizure warrants, arrests, handling any and all powdered materials that we're locating. Not to scare anybody, but this stuff is traveling up and down your roads. It's in vehicles, it's in trucks, it's in cars. Every time we respond to a vehicle accident, it may be an airbag deployment, it may be a fentanyl exposure. Again, as the agent said, we're trying to maintain the safety of not only the citizens and the public and the involved parties, but also our officers, particularly our canine dogs, for accidental exposures. You see it all the time. Officers are getting exposed unintentionally because they're walking into situations. Search warrants, if we go in on a search warrant and or an arrest and we locate a powder, we're not processing it. We're not touching it. We're doing everything we can. We're using personal protective equipment. It's all been issued to the officers, and they have a standing new order on how to handle this. We're not testing it. We're sending it to the drug lab. It's double sealed. It's marked as potentially fentanyl and or carfentanil. It's up and down the roads, and we are coming in contact with it. Where we are located is on the DC. We're halfway between DC and Baltimore, as everybody knows. Our typical drug of choice in Laurel, Prince George's County, has been PCP. It always has been, and that has been the mode that we have followed. That is up until now. Howard County is seeing a lot of heroin and or opioids. Anne Arundel is seeing a lot of it, and it is coming into the city. We are seeing drug overdoses. We are seeing fatal overdoses and in vehicles, in parking lots, whether it's the mall, whether it's a hotel, whether it's a restaurant. We're seeing it on side of streets, on street parking. They're overdosing in cars. We're seeing it in public restrooms. We're seeing it in restaurants. In fact, we ran one the other day. A restaurant in Laurel was a heroin overdose. Thankfully, he was saved because of the Narcan. Our officers have now become more of first responders as opposed to law enforcement. We're out of that law enforcement mode. We're more now into first responder mode. And by that, I mean we are actually getting alerted when Prince George's County Fire puts out a call and it meets a certain parameter within our guidelines, the officers are being dispatched. 9 times out of 10, the officers are the first ones on the scene. So any cardiac arrest and man down calls, overdoses, suicides, our officers are going. Our officers, every single car that we have, as I said, the officers have the Narcan. We also carry AEDs, and we're getting ready to go through what's called tech training, which is traumatic emergency care, critical care, tourniquets, blood clotting materials. So the roles have kind of reversed a little bit, and we're now more involved in the first responder mode, and we truly are the first responders. So the officers are being exposed to a lot more probabilities of being exposed to certain materials, to include the fentanyl and carfentanil. The other thing that we are doing is we're working with the pharmacies. We're having contact with the pharmacies and a lot of the physicians, thanks to the doc, and we're still doing DARE. DARE is huge. DARE not only teaches as far as the drug resistance, it also teaches, we're doing anti-bullying, we're doing kind of everything because truthfully, the major stem of this is the behavioral health. A lot of that is bullying. A lot of it is, there's so many different things these kids are suffering with, whether it's in their homes, whether it's mental, whether it's physical. There's a lot of different things that are causing these in these children, in the children. We talked about the demographics of this epidemic. The youngest documented overdose is 11 years old. The oldest is 90. It is not uncommon to go into a nursing home and find they have a stash. It's there. This is crossing every boundary there is. There is no set parameters. So we can't go look specifically for people that we think are abusers and or addicts. It is everybody and anybody. And a lot of these people are hiding it, and they're pretty good at hiding it. So the governor's office has done a very aggressive response to this, and I hope that he continues to fund it, and it allows us to continue doing what we can do. We're not going to stop it. We're not going to stop it by ourselves. Even our federal partners, our state partners, we're not going to stop it. We need the assistance of the citizens that are out there seeing it. If you see something, say something. I would rather respond to a man sleeping in a car than have it find out it's an overdose and unfortunately they died. Call us. We will come. We will check it out. We will handle it. I would rather get those kind of calls than the late notification calls. In fact, I went on a call, excuse me, that was a man down in a car, had been there for 24 hours. Guess what? He was dead. And he sat in front of a car. He sat in a car for 24 hours in front of somebody's house because they didn't think it was suspicious enough to call. They saw it, but did it warrant a phone call to the police? Yes, it warrants a call to the police. If it doesn't look right, if it doesn't feel right, call us. That's what we're here for. We're coming, we'll do what we need to do, and we will address it. So, again, I know everybody hears it. You know, we're talking about the OD mapping. We're participating with that. We're participating in trying to identify where this product is coming from. We're trying to tie the products together. There's testing through the labs where they're trying to match stuff up. It's out here. So, thank you very much for participating. We'll open it up for questions. And I would like to thank the panelists. Every one of them provided outstanding information. And I really do appreciate it. And I think that the audience appreciates it. So, yes, sir. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to come forward.
Good evening. My name is Dan. I'm a chaplain at Holy Cross Hospital. I'm also a police chaplain. I tell you, I've seen this a lot. And I thank the chief for organizing this, and I need to tip my hat to Allison, is that correct? For your courage to share with us what you have gone, and I need to tell your name to somebody at the hospital. We'd like to invite you. We got nurses there that need to hear this. The other question, officer, about, you mentioned the community, the churches perhaps, pastors in the area. Any way we can reach them, they can help out. I'd be glad to help you in that, if, to organize that. But are they responding? Because there's a lot of people that can be reached from the pulpit, one way or the other.
And that's why I say, you're not the traditional first responder, but you are a first responder because what you can do is refer families for help. Okay, just knowing all the contacts in your area where you can direct families to get help, and that's important because at any time someone can come to you because they know that you're a priest, and they're reaching out for spiritual healing, and so with that. You want to be able to say, hey, direct them to anybody here. And that's important in the healing process. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
You now have friends here.
Regarding Hope House, you mentioned the famous triangle, the mental, spiritual, and physical faculties.
Yes.
That's the balance of true education of a person. Hope House, have you had any, you don't have to mention names, the pastors that come with problems? Because I have heard of it. Ministers, you mentioned lawyers and people who come, but...
I can't remember of a minister being there, but I'm sure that we've had people from churches that were lay members that will come. And we have a good relationship with our local church, First United Methodist on Main Street.
Yes.
Pastor McDonald, he does a lot for us.
Oh, great. And my last question, quick. How do you subsidize your program, Hope
I'm sorry, we take Medicaid and private insurances
Okay.
as well as self-pay. But we'll turn nobody away if they come.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and just one last thing. It was mentioned about stigmas. Well, there's stigmas from everywhere within our communities, and in addition to our priests stepping up, you also have to get your congregations to step up and accept this. I mean, this is everybody. Everybody has to accept that this is a problem and accept it for what it is, because it could be you or me talking about our families tomorrow. And so that's we have former DEA agents who are dealing with it in their families, and I know them personally, and one who worked with me just lost his son to addiction. And and we've had a task force officer who now has a recovery house because he lost his daughter. So this happens to law enforcement as well, and it could happen to anybody.
I don't mean to take the time, but my question for Allison. Sure. You mentioned your children.
Yes.
And that's such a beautiful aspect. Your children, after you withdraw and you became clean and got your license back.
Oh, you mean like how's my relationship with them now?
Yes,
they worship the ground I walk on. They absolutely. Actually, my Cole will be 17 tomorrow. Michael will be 26 in 2 weeks. Michael calls me every day. Either one way, I call him or he calls me. Cole's a little different. He was a lot younger when we were going through it. So, but he's also 17. So it's the girlfriends and the friends. But he knows the gist of what I went through. And they both were just, when I got my nursing license back, they were just so proud of me, So yeah, so it's we're tighter now than I always say I don't have any regrets. I have a lot of guilt. I still carry a lot of guilt, but my addiction and my recovery, it made me such a better person.
That's goodness
and
guilt. I tip my hat to you, man. God bless you.
Thank you.
So I'm here as a representative from Lars. And so for those of you that don't know, we do work with a lot of the homeless population in Laurel. So we're always looking to make sure that we have the most up-to-date resources and referral sources for those in need. And so we just want to make sure that we have the most resources possible for those that come in with opioid addiction. So besides Hope House and Act 2, the NA meetings, and obviously Cherry Hill for methadone maintenance, what kind of other options are available for people in Laurel that have opioid or any kind of substance abuse issues? Anything else? Or
well, I'm gonna refer that to the experts, but I'm gonna tell you part of the problem with Laurel is it's not just Prince George's County. It's Montgomery, it's Howard, it's Anne Arundel. There's a lot of different resources throughout the region. We do have some within the city of Laurel. We have some on the outer perimeters of the city of Laurel. And of course, DC, Baltimore, Columbia. I mean, there's a lot of resources, and there's a lot of different centers, treatment centers, and other resources that are starting to pop up as a response to the governor's involvement. So I don't know if there is any others. I know there's some inpatient stuff. I know that Shady Grove has some stuff. I don't know that actually within what is within the Laurel area outside of the city.
Okay.
Check your Department of Health. Department of Health, Human Services, and those would be some good resources. I tell you, this has been, I took over my position 5 years ago, and I couldn't really talk to you like I'm talking to you now, because this was truly a learning process for me. You know, talking to people in recovery, not talking about law enforcement stuff, and treatment and prevention and mental health, and it's just been a process that I've had to acquire, just having 4 states, and we're not even talking about babies born addicted, and that's a problem, that we're seeing now. So it's just if you haven't done it, go visit a recovery house. You really have to really see it for yourself. The work that's being done by people in those facilities, and just going in and experiencing it, because one day you may have to deal with it one way or another. And so just talking to people like this panel, it's just it's eye-opening, and it takes time for you to really learn what's out there to help.
And again, the health department in Anne Arundel County, I know that they have stepped up a lot, because they do have, they're being swamped with the issues. So there is a lot of different resources. Again, there's a lot of developmental stuff that's going on as a response.
Right. I mean, I think what we're looking at mostly is, I think a lot of ours associate with PG County,
Right.
Especially since we provide a mailing address. So many of ours are PG County residents, but we just want to make sure that, like I said, we can refer people to resources that are helpful, and that we have all the resources available that we can give them.
And again, the dealings that I've had with Prince George's County, we are, I guess for a lack of a better description, we're still in a state of denial as far as this goes, because we're not seeing the large volume that other counties are within the DMV. So the response has been kind of stagnant. I mean, it's starting to step it up, but we're still in a state of denial in Prince George's County. That's why I would say reach out to the other counties, because we're still playing catch up, where they have been experiencing it and they're responding to it.
Yeah. And you're in such a growing and a large county. So it's not a small county at all. So, those are things, and it's growing. It's one of the largest in the country. If I ask my partner Hank Stawinski, he told me from day one, and his predecessor, how large this county is. And we made every effort to provide resources to the county, and because you also have gangs and those other groups that are trying to find their way into PG County.
Mr. Jim, isn't there's a sober house? Did you know about the sober house? There's Price House.
It's
Yeah.
next door to our building.
Okay, so you know about that one. And then was the one in Beltsville, Mr. Jim? Did you know about that one?
There's also Mountain Manor.
But nothing much closer.
Yeah, I think, as I said, since we work with a lot of the homeless in the area, it's about finding easily accessible resources to them, because the transportation in this area is such an issue, along with affording the transportation. So options like what are on Main Street. I know we had a lot of people come in when the methadone clinic closed down, looking for another resource, and so that was something that we wanted to make sure that we could provide to them when they're asking us for that.
Hopefully something to be increased in the future, as more recognition becomes available of the problem.
Thank you.
Well, I also do know that when the hospital is in the state of doing some reorganization, I think they're going to have, the ultimate goal is they will have some Suboxone clinics, and they will have some of that on campus at the hospital.
How you doing? All right. So I have two questions. You talked about the 8 ball. What is the value of the 8 ball nowadays here in the city of Laurel?
The value of it?
Yes.
Now,
You saying being behind it or being before it?
well, we need to get ahead of it, you
Right.
know, and I think right now, depending on where you are in the state,
Right.
you may be behind it. Okay, and there's some areas that you're ahead of it, and so the main thing is to get ahead of it with prevention and education, and it even goes with being, and I'll give you this statistic, and it's alarming, and some people say, well, this is different in other countries, but we're 5% of the world's population, the United States, and we consume over 90% of the world's pain medications. That's a problem, because from the time that we're born, we're taking medication, to the time that we're in our 70s and 80s. So and so it's a culture, and we have to get out of that culture and really think about being healthy without the medications and alternative methods of treating pain. And so other countries you may get feedback. Well, other countries are doing it a different way. Well, my thing, I'm not worried about other countries. I'm worried about the United States and communities that I have to serve. And so education, getting school systems to be aggressive and brave and be out in front of this, educating our young people, that's important. What effect this is going to have on your body if you take it. I just think those are the two. If you're ahead of it, prevent it. Okay? And if you happen to be behind the 8 ball, now we have to treat it and deal with all the economic stuff that comes along with it. And then after we treat it, then, who's going to provide employment to get people back on their feet? So this is a ever-growing problem. And,
So the second question, what organization, criminalized organization, pushing this evil drugs in the U.S., in the DMV area?
What groups?
Yes.
Well, you have distribution group networks from other states. Of course, this is, you could say you're in a heroin highway. So you have organizations, different gangs or groups that are trafficking into the state of Maryland. You have Highway 95 that runs all the way from New England all the way down to Miami. You have Highway 70 that comes across into Baltimore through Highway 81, which goes down from Baltimore into Tennessee. And so you have all these, I would say, if you laid a human body down, you have all these arteries that it comes into this state. And so you have different groups and we're seeing it from New York, Philadelphia, New Jersey. And then on the flip side, you have it coming in from the Midwest, from the West Coast. So there are a number of avenues into this state. Of course, as I mentioned, none of these drugs are produced in the state of Maryland. Somebody's got to be bringing it in. And that's what we're seeing. This is, like I said, the epicenter. and with amongst 3 or 4 other states. You know, Appalachia, you have Appalachia, and you have Baltimore and Washington.
So would it stop? Would y'all stop it in the new millennium? New world?
Yes. Yeah, and our thinking and training, I think we need to do better at in educating. And if it's on the prescription drug side, we have to do more training of our doctors and pharmacists, and control the pharmaceutical companies that are shipping it into various states.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to answer your question for on a local level.
Mm-hmm.
We're ahead of the 8 ball, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're doing a lot of education. We're doing a lot of non-traditional policing to deter it and slow it. It's trickling in. And anybody that says it's not is uninformed. It is trickling in. We are not inundated. However, it is coming. So the best thing we can do is keep fighting it, how we're fighting it, and try to deter it as much as we can. And as far as your groups, I mean, it's not like your typical drug manufacturers, like your marijuana where it's coming from the cartel, or your cocaine where it's coming from the cartels. There's no specific group or organizations. This is, again, there's no set demographics for it. The users, the dealers, the distributors, the manufacturers. I mean, it's crossing all kinds of lines. It's all about the money, and it's all about the demand. It's a supply and demand kind of deal.
Chief, you mentioned that your officers have procedures and protection.
Yes, sir.
For themselves. Do you have any kind of recommendations or training for civilians when they come upon an accident or somebody who's down, something like that, so that they don't stumble into?
We are trying to get that out. We're working now with the first responders as far as the fire and the EMS side. You know, again, the basic thing is if it doesn't feel right, or if you see a white substance, or you see a powder, or you see something floating in the air, the best thing to do is stay back. You know, that's the kind of response we're starting to deal with. It is not, again, it's not uncommon. If you watch a car accident today and the airbags deploy, there's all kinds of smoke, there's all kinds of powder, there's all kinds of dust. That's okay. But when you have a car that rolls over and there's powder coming, how do you know that you have an airbag deployment until you get close enough? So we are going to start trying to get it out to the public as an awareness type thing. The best thing I can tell you is if you see something, just call us. Do what you feel is right, and hopefully, if you do get an exposure, the Narcan will work. And what we're finding is the Narcan is it is successful. Again, every officer has at least 2 doses on them. You know, I've read reports where it works on the canine dogs. That's our biggest concern. You know, our dogs do a lot of searches, a lot of scans of cars. They get in there, they're breathing the stuff in. It has the same effect on them as it does on a human. So fortunately, as of right now, and I haven't read anything that says any differently, the Narcan is effective on the dogs. So it's kind of crossing all kinds of boundaries, and I don't think there is a set specific response to your question. It's just you have to be aware of your surroundings, and you have to make an evaluation of what you're walking into or potentially walking into.
Right, but I would expect that most people don't have any idea that
well,
need to be concerned.
But again, in today's environment, it's not uncommon for 5 people to stand around and watch a guy laying on the street and do nothing. I mean, we're not responding, so if you're not responding, you're not subjecting yourself to any exposures.
Right, but I would think that if there's a car accident, you know, people are going to rush to it, you know, to try to help.
And I'll give you a prime example. We had a rollover here the other night, or last night. There was about 15 people that were standing around. Out of those 15 people, 13 of them had a phone in their hand and were videoing or taking pictures. That's the idea of a response today. Whereas 10 years ago, before these phones, before the cameras, you know, people would get involved in situations. Now it's all about video and recording and posting it on Facebook or Twitter or wherever you're putting it, and that's their response. So, again, I wish there was a set answer. I just don't think there is. It's something that we as an entire entity are going to have to work on. You know, as far as what kind of intervention, what kind of education that we provide to the general public as far as responding to issues. Thank you. No, it is not.
So Narcan is not harmful, so don't worry about, if you want to get Narcan from the pharmacy and you think somebody's overdosing, it's not going to hurt them if they're not. Just so everybody.
I don't know if they can get high enough for me, but it's great. Thank you all for all of your really informative and insightful comments and conversations tonight. It's been really, really helpful. I think what this fellow was describing is really classic bystander. And one of the things we can do is something, right? Just something. Because, classic bystander says that the more people that are around, the less likely we are to do anything. So I am a social scientist, and I work primarily with HIV/AIDS prevention, substance abuse, and Hep C in Washington, D.C. And I am here tonight because I was curious about what was happening in my community, because I do so much there that I feel like I don't know enough about what goes on right in my back door. So I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be here and to listen and to learn. The one piece that I really wanted to kind of highlight and also maybe pinpoint and maybe get your thoughts on is pain. And we understand that a lot of the intersectionalities with pain, emotional pain, the co-occurring issues, behavioral health, mental health, sort of are the incubators for the beginning of what happens to be the prescription drugs or whatever, trying to inoculate this pain. And part of what I understand is that the reason why the drug is the first line of defense is because, one, it's easy, and two, the first place that people go when they experience pain is usually their primary physician. And sometimes, even though the pain is lower back pain or some other type of pain, there's been lots of evidence that non-prescription or cognitive therapies are equally as effective as the medicinal drug therapies. So my question is, what thoughts, if any, have you given to the non-prescription sort of integrated care methodologies that deal with people when they come through the door, that talk about pain, regardless of whether it's the most common pain being lower back pain, or whether it's some type of pain that indicates that there may be emotional pain? What types of integrated care models are we thinking about as a community that might help offset? And I know that's a bigger issue that you can't solve as I look at you, but I'm just curious about what those, what your thinking might be around that.
Yeah, if I may, again, I'm a physician in family medicine, and as a practitioner, family medicine practitioner, we actually treat patients as a whole. It's not a matter of just looking at just one particular thing. So when patients do come up to you, of course, you're 90% you're trying to get the history of what is going on with the patient, both emotionally and physically, and try to find out what the problem is. And then the other 10% is where you now make your decision. In making a decision, it takes a skill or a strategy as to is this something that I need to investigate further on, or is this something that I may want to refer the patient to be able to seek for alternative treatment, such as psychologists, psychiatrists, even the chiropractor or anything like that. So the knee-jerk reflex nowadays, today, I'm glad that the DEA is here too, for all physicians, is that we don't want to just pick up our pen and just write that prescription right away. It's more of Maybe can I get them to physical therapy? Can I do some more research on findings on what is the cause, what is the root cause of this patient having this problem, rather than just easily writing prescription. Before, yes, we do that easily, but now we're being more educated, and that's what I've been hearing on this panel, being more educated, being more aware of what the problem is in our society. Just for me alone, I sit back, whenever I'm looking at a patient, I'm also looking for history. And before I write, I'm asking myself, does this patient really need this? Or could I find other alternatives to treat this patient? So I think your question, it's cumbersome, but I think on my own perspective, this is actually how we deal with patients like that. It's not a matter of just writing the prescription, but a matter of finding the root cause. Thank you.
And I'm glad he's here, and I'm glad he said that, because that's the good doctor. That's the good doctor, because and those are the things that we look at when we even audit what the doctors and the pharmacists are doing, whether they're taking these notes, what they're doing with their patients. They see the warning signs, they know it. And, and now they're becoming more aware, because it's not just about a smiley face and, what level of pain you have. It's about checking all the boxes now, and responsibility. Yeah.
Because I think that your statistic is it's also consistent for narcotics, that we represent, even though we're 5% of the population, you're like, stop coming for me, right? That we consume like 90% of the narcotics. And the research says that the United States is not in more pain than other countries.
We're not.
We are not in more pain, but we are on more pain medication.
Let me tell you this story, and this is what I normally talk about. I did in my lifetime a little football coaching, all right, and the startling thing was, here's the most aggressive sport that you could play and relieve your frustrations. Well, I had parents who actually sent their kids to practice on depressants. And so I'm saying, so this is where it starts, because parents want to calm their kids down, but I don't need a calm kid on a football field. I need one that's alert.
That's right.
And able to perform. And so I had to talk to these parents to say, listen, your kid can't play under the influence, and I'm not going to tolerate that. And so understand what this evolves at a young age within our society,
right?
And so we have to get away from it,
right? And
it's just a matter of calming your kids down because you're overexerted. Well, why? That's not a reason to medicate your child.
Right.
And there's things that we can do as a community. And the second thing, if you think that your basement is an escape route for problems, and you think just because your child is in the basement, guess what we have down there? Computers and everything else. And so you have the bullying that goes on the computers, and we think that our kids are okay because they're down in that basement. And anything can happen down there that you're not aware of. And so we have to be more alert and really, and this is where the prevention comes in. There's things that we're doing to ourselves that, it just exacerbates this overall problem.
No, I think so. I think that it's a culture that has an epidemic.
Yeah, it's a culture that we have to get out of.
I agree.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So, full disclosure, I'm a local chiropractor. I actually work in the biggest office here in Laurel. We've been here for over 30 years. But I'm always wondering what we're doing to, beat people to the punch of needing an opioid or needing that painkiller because, I'm not the only one, we're not the only office, but there's really not a great grassroots movement to have people be educated on other options for natural non-drug options before it gets to where he has to intervene and it's so bad because then they get on that and they still come into my office then a month later and now the list has grown because they've also gone to urgent care here, now they're on a Flexerol, now they're on this, and then they're still adding their Tylenol, this is going to sound like a bad joke, V&V, Vicodin and vodka. They're adding these things to their list and it's getting worse and worse and worse, and then they're saying fix me. And there's no it's about education, but they know they can go into these new urgent cares, and there's more and more popping up here in Laurel. And every single time you get in a 5-mile-per-hour car accident, they're throwing a Flexerol at you, which turns into something else. And then they come in here. So what are we doing to, unite some of the local businesses that are, here trying to help, or that I'm going to talk to in our meetings that we have, monthly to try and fix these problems where we can help here in Laurel. That's why everyone else is here.
For the as you know, like for the American Medical Association and different organizations, they do have sessions like this where they can be able to educate the providers to make them aware of the epidemic or the problem that we're having. I think with what you said, like urgent care centers and emergency rooms and all that, all physicians actually, I think, were in Washington, D.C., were supposed to have attended an opioid class or session before we could be relicensed again. So those are avenues that they're actually doing, trying to get all the medical doctors, physicians to be aware of that, and not just first time you just slap them on some medication or something like that. So that's just on the medical standpoint,
It hurts my heart to know that someone had, multiple surgeries and went, made an addiction way worse, or, aggravated, or I don't know how you would phrase it yourself, when that could have potentially been fixed, managed, or done something, potentially would not have hit rock bottom. When I work for my father, our door's been open for 30 years. There's been chiropractors here in Laurel longer than that. That's where my mind goes as a part of this community. And unfortunately, I live in Baltimore City right next to a methadone clinic as well. So I live in that world at both ends of the spectrum. So, that's where I think, and I know obviously that's not an indictment of you or anything you do, but how are we trying to fix that problem? I know that's why we're here, but
yeah, and on the diversion side, and that's one of the things that we have to be aware of, because if the individual is already on medication, you really can't prescribe them certain medications. So at some point, they're going to have to, really seek treatment, and those are the things that you look at, because if you have the chart and they've gone to 3 or 4 other doctors, then there's a timeout there, and there may be an indication that individual's just trying to use you to get more medication that they don't need. And so that's something, because they are probably in pain, but more consultation from the family doctor or whatever you can do to try to figure the real need for that medication. Yeah, and that's a difficult thing when you already diagnosed that the person has an injury. So that's.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Just voicing the concerns.
I know.
You want to be a part of the solution, not
exactly.
the problem.
Exactly. And I think you are, because you're recognizing it, and you see it, and there's just going to have to be a point where, hey, where the referral came from, and that sort of thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, we're getting close to the time to close this out. Again, I'd like to thank everybody in the audience that came out. I hope you're walking away with a little more information and a little more insight as to what we were battling and what we're going to continue to battle. Again, the final thought is that if you see something, say something. I would also like to thank the panelists for coming, participating, and providing the insight and the experiences that they did. So thank you very much. We, in the near future, will be having some more panels as far as domestic violence and human trafficking. So just awareness type things. So look for those. Again, thank you for anybody that came out. Thank you for anybody that's watching. And thank you to the panelists. Does anybody have any closing remarks? Thank you very much.